Hello and welcome to the Lend Hoping Nothing podcast. I'm Michael Humphreys and this is episode 16. And today I want to talk about the metaphysics of money. And I typically like to make a sharper distinction between metaphysics and natural philosophy, because really what we're going to be talking about is more related to thinking through Aristotle's four causes. But that's just me. But yeah, let's kind of get into it. So it's important to think about, what money actually is, because there's a lot of confusion around it, and it's very central to our lives and the way that we conduct our business. And so understanding money correctly is important. It also contributes to some of my criticisms of Bitcoin that I talked about in the prior episode. So you might be interested for that reason as well. So there's three, in kind of modern thinking, there's three main functions of money, and then just kind of a fourth point that we'll talk about. So first, money is a medium of exchange. Money is a unit of account, so we're able to say how much there is here and there as far as valuable things. It's a store of value, so you can hold money for a while so you can spend later. And those are the three kind of functions of money. And then finally, it's established by custom or convention or law what the thing is that is money. So I kind of want to, that's kind of the modern thinking. But I kind of want to give more of a basic account of money. And so really the origin of money arises from human need. And the reality that I'm not always capable of providing for myself all that I need in order to flourish as a human being. And so, not only just myself, but even within my family or my community, we may not be able to come together to provide for all that we need. And so, if I have a farm, I'll have other things that I need that I can't provide for myself. I may be able to get food and my own shelter, but there are further things that I'll need to thrive, for example. So from this arises the need for exchange. And so, for example, if I am a farmer, I'm going to need tools to just engage in my farming. And so I might reach out to the blacksmith and be like, hey, I will give you food if you give me tools. And so we can engage in a mutually beneficial exchange. Now, the blacksmith also, he needs iron, for example, to be able to engage in his blacksmithing. And so he meets with the miner and they exchange maybe tools for iron. And then the miner needs food, so he exchanges stuff with the farmer to get what he needs. And so there's this this really great need, in spite of whatever we're trying to do, that we need things that we're not capable of procuring ourselves. So this fundamental need for exchange. And the principle for understanding exchange is commutative justice. So I am not going to engage in an exchange where I suffer a loss unless I'm in extreme need and someone's taking advantage of me. But in general, I'm not going to suffer a loss from engaging in an exchange, because I would not willingly suffer that loss. I'd just prefer to keep things the way they are. And so, we engage in this exchange where there's this mutually beneficial exchange, but there's the sense in which commutative justice requires an equality of thing for thing. And so this equality, this requirement of justice, becomes sort of a central problem for exchange in general. And Aristotle brings up this important point in the 5th chapter of the 5th book of the Nicomachean Ethics, where he's talking about commutative justice. And he says, for example, well, how many shoes is a house? Like, if we are going to have this equality of thing for thing, how do we obtain this equality? And he says that this is where money arises. And so money acts as an intermediary to be able to say, well, shoes is this much and a house is this much. And so shoes is $5, a house is $100,000 or whatever. And so it acts as an intermediary to be able to begin to establish that sort of equality. And so in that sense, money is a measure. It's able to bring order and kind of unitize these different things. And because exchange is fundamentally about, you need and I need, and we're coming together to try to meet each other's needs, money is the measure of human need. And this is why money is capable of measuring almost everything. It's because everything that we need can be given a price. And so it has this sort of universal scope in that sense. But this fundamental realization that money is a measure brings us to the notion that when we consider measures in general, so things that you use as a standard to judge by, whether you're trying to differentiate things or if you're trying to count them, it is important because what acts as a measure only acts as a measure insofar as it contains that which it measures. That was a big lot of words. So, for example, in law is a measure of human behavior. And so it measures it as illegal or legal. So within law, there is the definition, for example, of murder. And so it specifies what that kind of behavior is and that it is illegal. So within law, it contains, in a sense, the essence of what that behavior is, of a human behavior. And from that, you're able to judge other human behaviors. And so if law had like Maxwell's equations or the way that animals and plants behave, that would not be a way of saying anything about human behavior. Because how would you judge human behavior off of something like that? Another example would be like time. So time classically in Aristotle is the measure of motion according to before and after. And so time in a sense contains motion. I mean, just look at a clock. A clock is something that's moving that you use to measure other things that are moving. So what happens when your clock breaks? You can't measure time anymore because it's stopped moving. And indeed, a second is defined now as a very precise frequency of a very stable type of radiation from a particular type of atom. I forget exactly which. But it's very closely defined to a particular kind of motion. And so, time is a measure of motion, and that which we use to measure motion itself contains motion. In fact, it couldn't measure motion lest it had motion in it. And so additionally to this, so money enters in to facilitate exchange as a measure of motion or a measure of value. or measure of human need. And part of this is that in order to facilitate that and act as a measure of motion, it also needs to store value, because you're going to not only need to buy things today, you're going to need to buy them tomorrow. And so it has that sense of being a store of value that you can use later on as well. And then, of course, obviously, it's something that's established by convention or law. And here, convention, like in prisons, cigarettes are used for money. So I hear. And that's what you use for money. In the United States, the US dollar is money, but there's also other things that are treated like money, like bank deposits. So bank deposit, like a savings or checking account, is not something which is strictly speaking like dollar bills, but it's a security claim against the bank's assets. And so that itself is treated as money. And I mean, we do that all the time in engaging in different transactions or writing checks or things like that. Yeah. So with that sort of background, so like the fundamental logic behind what it's for, why it arises, and a little bit about what money is, I think we can kind of look at now what are the Aristotelian causes and how that might help us in our analysis of money. So there's the final, formal, material, and efficient cause. So the final cause, the fundamental purpose of exchange or of money, is to facilitate exchange. And this connects with that sort of modern function notion as a medium of exchange. But that's the whole reason that money exists in the first place, is to facilitate exchange because we have need of things that we don't possess. So that's the final cause. Now the formal cause is, the what money is. And that is that money is a measure. And this kind of connects to that notion of a unit of account. So it measures the other things. It unitizes them. The shoe's $5. The house is $100,000. The loaf of bread is, $2, and the eggs is like $50 now, and so forth. So it's able to provide a measure of how much each of these things is worth. And so that's the sort of formal cause. The material cause, because of what is required for a thing to be a measure, the material cause is that it be something that already has value. And so, for example, whether that's seashells or gold or fiat currency or whatever, it has to be something that already has value in order to measure value. Now, of course, when something is conventionally treated as money, it's going to become more valuable because people are not only using it for its intrinsic value, but also for this sort of additional conventional value as well. And then finally, the efficient cause is simply that it is established by human ingenuity and convention. This is what brings it to be. We all decide, well, not all of us, but somebody decides that, hey, this thing is going to be the thing that we use as money, and that's going to be established. So that's kind of the Aristotelian analysis of money. And so that's kind of like the metaphysical part of this. So there's a few kind of implications, especially around the material cause, that we need to kind of draw out here. So as I said, in order to be a measure, you have to contain that which you are measuring. And so the thing that we use to measure value should be something that is already valuable. And so, cigarettes in a prison are already something valuable. And then they go further to become or be treated as money. Now, the U.S. dollar is a fiat currency, and it is something valuable in itself. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but fiat currencies fundamentally are tax coupons, if you will. So the United States government basically issues these as securities, and they have entitlements associated with it. And the entitlement is that you can receive this as, or you can use that to remit tax liabilities for your activities in the market. So you engage in, buying and selling or whatever you do, and the United States government says, well, you have to pay these taxes, and you give them the dollar bills, and that remits the taxes. So that is something that is really valuable. And then additionally, being able to then use that as money is an addition to that. And one of the things I would point out, though, is the serious error of saying that fiat currency in general, and the US dollar in particular, is that if it is valuable only because we all kind of pretend it is then that implies that all exchange with dollars is gravely unjust, because you're exchanging something that is worthless for something that is not worthless. And so were that true, though it is not, it would be a serious problem for anyone who cares or has a conscience about justice. So this then brings us to the point about Bitcoin. So in addition to the whole issue of what Bitcoin is and the problem of, the shared ledger and that it doesn't actually represent anything, is that it isn't anything valuable. It has no entitlements. It's good for nothing. The only reason that we believe it's valuable is because other people believe it's valuable. It has no value beyond what other people think it has. And so there's a circularity there in the value of Bitcoin. Because, yeah, sure, it has a price, but it has a price because other people think it's valuable. So why is it valuable? Well, other people think it's valuable. Why do they think it's valuable? Because other people think it's valuable, and so forth and so on. So, but my point here would be that because of that error, Bitcoin does act in kind of this, it doesn't act as money because it can't formally be money, but because money is the measure of human need or human value, because people mistakenly believe it is valuable, there is a sort of similitude of money acting, but it's not money formally and actually, because it is not something valuable. So it's not actually measuring anything valuable because it is in itself worthless. And part of this has to do with, pure subjective value theory about it's valuable because people believe it's valuable. And you can, if you're interested in that, go check out my podcast on economic value. I think that'll kind of help explain some of the things. So, in addition to this, because we have this understand the final cause of money as this end to facilitate exchange, we can then talk about also, what is going to be good money, what is going to function well as money. And one of the big things is going to be you want money that is going to not lose its value over time. So, for example, certain things that are perishable, like food, would not act good as money because they would deteriorate over time and then fail to facilitate exchange, because then the longer you wait, the less valuable it becomes, and then you're not able to engage in exchange when you need to. And so the stable value of money is extremely important. And so here we can kind of talk about how the material cause is aptly suited to the formal cause. So for example, kind of the Aristotelian analysis again is that, sure, you can make a saw blade, like you can make that shape and put it into clay or wood, but it's not going to function well as a saw blade, and certainly not as well as a saw blade that shape, that those teeth, that is put into steel or some sort of rigid, firm metal like iron or steel. And so certain things are not going to function well as money. And so things that are able to retain their value is what you're going to want to look for. And so classically, one of the big things is going to be gold, because it doesn't tarnish, it's fairly inert. In addition, it's easily divisible, and that also contributes to the ability to engage in exchange, because different things are going to be worth different amounts of gold. And so, if you have a pound of gold, you can easily cut it up into smaller pieces and engage in exchange as well. So there's another way in which it easily facilitates exchange. And so, again, it has that notion of the final cause. And fiat currency is an important example here, because it is a security, it is even more durable in a sense than even gold, because there's a certain immateriality about securities. So it doesn't matter how deteriorated the dollar bill is, as long as it's recognizable as a dollar bill or coin or whatever. It still acts as a security, as a bearer security. And so the security portion of it is, eminently durable. And this is also why, going back to savings accounts, these are also extremely good money, because they're extremely durable. Like, as long as the bank exists, that savings account is going to exist. Like, it's not going to deteriorate over time. Now, there's questions around inflation and things, and the U.S. government printing more money or changing reserve levels and the effect that has on fractional reserve banking and things like that. And that's a way that the government can control money as a measure. And a just government is going to seek to control money as a measure, so that it has a sufficient stability for the sake of the common good. And this is one of the reasons why a gold standard is actually a bad idea, because when you have a gold standard, you're tying your fiat currency, which is a security related to certain entitlements, and you're tying that to a commodity, which may go up or may go down. Maybe there becomes a huge demand for gold. Maybe it's discovered gold has new medicinal uses, or it has an amazing industrial use, or whatever, and that radically changes your currency and your money. And so it removes the ability of the state to be able to manage the stability of the currency. Now, that our government manages it very poorly currently is a separate issue. But having the ability, we're getting into separate territory. But the ability to manage the stability of the currency is also an extremely important point. And part of what comes out of this, also an implication, is that anything valuable in principle can be money, because and you can think of it as with time. So you can have this really precise frequency of this particular atom, or you could have a clock, or you could have a very irregular motion, like the coming in of the tide, or how fast does it rain, or there's all sorts of different motions you could use to measure time, or all sorts of motions you could use as time to measure other motions. And so we could use the orbit of Jupiter to measure our own motion around the sun, or whatever, So in principle, it could be anything, but of course there are limits to what we ought to use, because some things are going to be good, other things are not. And so part of what comes out of this as well is that money is not a sort of thing apart from other things. It is a way of treating something. And so it's money kind of takes something and super adds onto it and raises it to this sort of measure, so that it's not some third thing, or some second thing, I guess. But it is something that we take from the world and then treat it as a measure, and it's just as true with time. And then the final sort of thing that I kind of want to point out is part of what all of this implies is that ultimately all exchange is some sort of barter. So you're exchanging this good for this good. It's just conventionally we've all decided that one of those goods is what we're going to measure everything else by, if you're exchanging with money. And so this kind of raises some questions about who's the buyer and seller in different exchanges. What does just price exactly mean? Because ultimately what you're looking for is, in just price, is that commutative justice is established between the two things. And so there's the issue of, what's the value? What is the value even of money? And so that kind of becomes an issue as well. But there's this kind of fundamental point in recognizing that money is not something apart from other goods. It's just a way of treating goods that you then start to be able to think about, well, exchange really is barter. And I think at a fundamental level it gets at that. You can make qualifications and distinctions further on, but fundamentally the realization is that you're exchanging good for good. And then this gets back to the point about Bitcoin, is that you're exchanging Bitcoin for goods, and is there equality there? And I say not, because Bitcoin's in fact, it's less than worthless. It is a waste of time and energy. So those are kind of, so this type of analysis, Aristotelian analysis of money, lines up very well kind of with the way we typically think about money in modern terms, but it sort of it takes those concepts and treats them a little bit differently and expands them. So like, for example, a unit of account, it's a little bit broader than that. A store of value is a little bit broader than that. And also it's, I think, corrective, because the store of value there is just like whatever people are willing to pay for it, right? And then a medium of exchange, well, anything acts as a medium of exchange in any exchange. So, but those are, and then working through some of this, those are kind of some of my thoughts. So if you have other thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you think I'm wrong, certainly people think I'm wrong about Bitcoin, leave those in the comments, and yeah, we can have a conversation or whatever. So thank you for listening, and have a good day. Bye.